Imagine walking through an old town, the kind that seems frozen in time. The cobblestone streets whisper under your feet, and the houses lean inward, as though trying to share a secret. Among these forgotten buildings, there's one place the locals never talk about. Its windows are dark, its paint peeled, and the air around it feels heavier. They'll tell you it's just another abandoned home, but if you press further, their eyes shift nervously, and they change the subject. You see, this is where a family once lived, and then, one night, they vanished. No one heard them leave. No one saw a carriage, no footprints, no goodbyes, only silence. A silence that has lasted for generations. Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit subscribe and tap the bell icon before this story pulls you in too deep. It was the year 1929, a time of growing unease. The world seemed to balance between progress and collapse, and this small rural town carried its own ghosts. The family in question lived at the very edge of the community, where the forest thickened and shadows seemed to linger longer than the daylight allowed. They were not poor nor wealthy, not celebrated nor despised, simply present. Their name was barely ever spoken aloud, as if they belonged and yet somehow didn't. They were seen in church, at markets, their children occasionally spotted walking to school with pale, expressionless faces. They seemed to exist, but never to connect. On October 13th, the night the town will never forget, neighbors claimed they saw a faint glow from the family's windows. Not candlelight, but something strange, flickering and unsteady. Some swore it was a storm lantern. Others whispered it looked like fire, though the house never burned. The next morning, when the sun rose, the family was gone. Not a single trace left behind. Plates remained on the table, with food still cooling. A Alf-written letter sat on the desk. Clothes still hung in the closet. Even the family dog was missing, its chain broken, as though it had been pulled toward something unseen. Investigators came from nearby towns, combed the woods, searched the riverbanks, questioned every villager. Nothing. No evidence of departure, no signs of struggle. It was as though the family had been swallowed whole by the earth itself. The strangest part, their neighbors never spoke their names again. Not in whispers, not in confession, as if silence was the only way to protect themselves from meeting the same fate. The weeks that followed the disappearance became a wound in the town's memory, a wound they tried to bandage with silence, but investigators recorded details that were never meant for public eyes. In an archived report, yellowed paper, handwriting stiff with unease, there is mention of a locked room inside the house. The door, iron-bolted from within, was forced open by men carrying lanterns. What they found unsettled even the most hardened officers. The room was almost bare, its windows boarded, its furniture stripped down to skeletal frames. But the walls were carved with symbols, hundreds of them. Circles intersecting lines, crude drawings of figures without eyes, and a sequence of dates stretching back decades, long before the family had even been born. No one could say who etched them, or why. The report notes something else. The carvings were fresh. Dust still clung in piles beneath the grooves, as though the work had been finished only hours before the family disappeared. And then there was the journal, a single book lying open on the floor, its page damp as if left in the rain. Written in the father's hand were words that chilled the investigators. "We were chosen," he scrawled. "The door is opening. We cannot fight it anymore. Tonight it will take us." The ink smudged abruptly, trailing off mid-sentence. That was the final entry. But here's the part that made the case grow colder rather than warmer. When the investigators returned weeks later to collect evidence, the journal was gone. The symbols on the walls, erased, not scratched over, not painted, but gone. The plaster smooth, unmarked, as though the carvings never existed. It was only the officer's own sketches and frightened testimonies that survived in the archive. The town grew restless. Rumors sprouted like weeds. Some said the family was taken by a religious sect that had existed quietly within the town for years, disguised as ordinary citizens. Others swore it was older than religion, a force tied to the land itself. Children whispered that if you stepped too close to the house after midnight, you could hear faint voices calling from beneath the floorboards. The mayor, weary of scandal, ordered the case sealed. The house boarded, and the memory of the family left to rot in obscurity, but obscurity has its own hunger. The more they tried to bury the story, the stronger it grew. Outsiders began to arrive, amateur historians, occultists, thrill seekers, and with them came darker questions. What exactly had the family meant when they wrote, "The door is opening"? And if it truly did, where did it lead? The decades after the disappearance turned the family's house into something more than wood and stone. It became a forbidden landmark. Children dared each other to run up and touch its door, though most never made it past the gate. Adults walked faster when passing it, heads down, as though the house itself were watching. The forest crept closer each year, roots curling over its foundation, branches clawing against its shutters, nature seemingly eager to reclaim what humans had abandoned. But some records suggest the house was never truly empty. In 1947, a traveling salesman passing through a town claimed he saw a candle flickering in the window late at night. Certain he'd find squatters or a thief, he approached, but the closer he came, the darker the house became until the light vanished entirely. Locals dismissed his story as the drunken ramblings of a man far from home. Yet in the years that followed, others made similar claims. The sound of a piano playing faintly from inside, the sight of pale figures moving behind curtains, the echo of a child's laughter carried on the wind, always fleeting, always denied. The strangest event came in 1963, when a group of students from a nearby college broke into the house, eager to document proof of the haunting. Their camera, old and boxy, captured only a handful of images before jamming. In one photograph, the students appear huddled in the bare kitchen, their faces blurred from motion. But behind them, faintly visible in the corner of the frame, stands a family of 4. Their faces are indistinct, almost smudged, but their clothing is from another era. When the students developed the film, one of them swore the figures had not been there when the picture was taken. The students left the town that same night. In interviews years later, one admitted that when he looked through the cracked window before fleeing, he saw the family's dining table set once again, food steaming as though freshly served, though the air around him was ice cold. None of them ever returned. By the 1970s, the town had fully embraced its silence. Officials denied the house even existed on public maps. Old-timers waved off questions with bitterness, And yet, those who dared to dig deeper uncovered an unsettling detail. The family that vanished was not the first. Hidden in the parish records were references to another disappearance nearly identical in 1884. A different family, same house, same sudden vanishing, with the belongings left untouched. And like the later case, the records were swiftly sealed, names scrubbed, as though history itself wanted them erased. The repetition of history could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Two families, separated by nearly half a century, both swallowed by the same house, both erased from memory. Yet, the deeper one digs into the archives, the more unsettling the patterns become. Parish registries, court records, census lists, entire names tied to the property seem to vanish in cycles, as though the land itself demanded a sacrifice every generation. By the mid-1980s, a small circle of historians began to exchange letters about the mystery. Their correspondence, now yellowed and brittle, reveals a chilling discovery. One historian traced the property back to its original owner, a man named Elias Wren, a recluse who purchased the land in 1832. Elias was a surveyor by trade, tasked with charting the forests and riverbanks of the region. But his maps contained symbols not used by any surveyor before or since. Spirals, interlocking circles, strange glyphs tucked into the corners of otherwise ordinary charts. Local folklore says Elias was obsessed with an ancient door, said to lie hidden beneath the earth, a threshold that could only be opened with ritual and bloodline. When Elias died, the property passed through a string of families, each leaving abruptly or vanishing under questionable circumstances. But the most sinister detail came from Elias's will. His final words: "The house must never fall silent. It must be fed." The meaning was never explained, and his estate records were sealed by the county within days of his burial. Those who tried to uncover the truth met resistance. Archives lost entire boxes of documents. Microfilm reels snapped under pressure. Files misfiled, misplaced, or blacked out with ink. It was as if an invisible hand was erasing history as quickly as it could be written. But despite the obstacle, whispers spread among researchers. Elias had not discovered the land he had been lured to it. Some even speculated he was only the caretaker of something far older, something that predated the town, the country, perhaps even humanity itself. The townspeople, meanwhile, hardened their silence. Ask about Elias Wren in the late 20th century, and you'd receive nothing but blank stares or thinly veiled threats. To them, the story was not history, but curse, and they knew curses survive by being remembered aloud, so they locked their lips and turned their backs on the past. But silence has cracks, and in those cracks, stories breathe. Travelers still came, lured by rumor, and some claimed they heard voices whispering Elias's name from inside the boarded house. Others said they saw shadows moving across windows sealed shut for decades, and every account ended the same way, with the feeling that the house had been waiting. By the time the 1990s arrived, the story of the vanished family was less spoken myth and more forbidden truth, the kind of tale locals warned outsiders not to chase. But there were always those who ignored the warnings. One of them was a journalist named Claire Holloway. Her work appeared in fringe history magazines. the type of publications that thrived on secrets that didn't fit into the clean lines of mainstream narratives. Claire was drawn to the story of the house and the disappearances like a moth to flame. In the summer of 1993, she visited the town under the pretense of writing about rural architecture. What she discovered never reached publication. Her notes, preserved only because her family demanded an investigation into her own sudden disappearance, provide perhaps the most chilling account of all. Claire described the townspeople as polite but wary, answering her questions with smiles that carried no warmth. When she mentioned the vanished family, conversations ended abruptly. Doors were shut in her face. One old man told her in a hushed voice, "That house doesn't belong to us. It never did." Despite their resistance, Claire managed to slip inside the boarded structure. Her descriptions are vivid. She wrote of air so thick it felt wet, as though the house itself breathed, of footsteps echoing in rooms she knew were empty, and of one particular sound that haunted her even after she fled, the faint creak of chairs moving at the dining table, as though someone invisible had just taken their seats. The final pages of her notes are fractured, sentences trailing off, handwriting unsteady. She mentioned finding a cellar door she hadn't seen before, one that seemed to appear where it hadn't been hours earlier. Her last entry read simply, "It's open now. The air is rushing in. I think I can hear them." The line cut off there. Claire was never seen again. Her car remained parked in town, keys in the ignition. The official police investigation lasted barely 2 weeks before being declared inconclusive. Reporters who tried to follow the trail found themselves met with silence, threats, or mysteriously missing documents. Claire's family received only a thin folder of her belongings, her pen, her torn notebook, and a single photograph taken with a disposable camera. The image shows the cellar door, cracked open, a darkness inside so absolute it seems to swallow the light around it. The family sued for answers, but the case went nowhere. Locals still insist Claire left on her own, though they never explain how her car remained behind. Those who whisper otherwise say the house had grown hungry again, and Claire was simply its next meal. The disappearance of Claire Holloway should have sealed the story forever, but instead, it spread like wildfire beyond the town's borders. Paranormal investigators, amateur ghost hunters, and even academic researchers began circling the mystery, determined to uncover what the locals worked so hard to erase. What they encountered was not clarity, but a deeper, more dangerous fog. In 2001, a research team from a nearby university petitioned the county to study the house. Their request was granted on the condition that they remove nothing from the property. For 3 nights, the team set up recorders, cameras, and motion sensors. Only fragments of their work survived. The audio recordings captured strange distortions, voices layered on top of each other, speaking in tones too low to be human. One tape contained 20 seconds of silence, followed by a child's laugh so clear it sent one of the researchers into shock. The cameras fared no better. Footage repeatedly glitched, showing frames of the empty rooms overlaid with quick flashes of people seated at the dining table, their heads bowed as if in prayer. And the motion sensors, they detected movement in the cellar every single night, though the researchers swore no one dared step inside. After the 3rd night, the team abandoned the project. Their notes, later leaked, revealed they believed the cellar was not a space at all but an opening, something that breathed. One researcher wrote, "It is not a haunting, it is a hunger. The families were not taken randomly. They were offerings." The county quickly shut down further study. Grants were pulled, equipment confiscated. One member of the team left academia entirely, claiming he woke each night to hear scratching beneath his bed, as though something had followed him home. Meanwhile, the locals doubled down on their silence. To them, the outsiders had only stirred a wound better left untouched. Yet even their silence could not stop the whispers. By the mid-2000s, rumors spread of more disappearances. Hikers lost in the woods near the house, drifters who never made it out of town. The official records list nothing, but locals mutter otherwise. They say the house does not choose randomly. It waits, it listens, and when the time comes, it calls. What makes the story most disturbing is the sense of inevitability. Families vanish, historians vanish, journalists vanish, and still the house stands, boarded and silent, yet somehow alive, a scar the town cannot heal, a door that refuses to stay shut. Today the house still stands, though you won't find it marked on any map. Locals insist it has finally fallen silent, but their voices tremble when they say it. Travelers who stumble across it by accident often describe the same sensations. The air grows colder, birds refuse to sing, and the forest seems to tilt toward the structure, as though every tree is leaning to listen. Most who encounter it turn back immediately. A few steps closer, fewer still enter. Almost none are heard from again. What survives are fragments, whispers, rumors, scraps of photographs traded like contraband among those obsessed with the mystery. One image shows the cellar door open wider than in Claire's notes, the darkness inside stretching unnaturally across the floor. Another depicts the family's portrait, once hung on the living room wall, though the faces are scratched away, leaving only hollow silhouettes. These images circulate in corners of the internet where the story is spoken, not as history, but as warning. Some theories try to rationalize it. Perhaps the families joined a hidden cult, disappearing willingly into ritual. Perhaps toxic gas seeped from the cellar, causing hallucinations before death. Perhaps the locals were complicit all along, covering up truths too shameful to confront. But none of these theories explain the repeating cycle, the erasures from history, or the undeniable accounts of those who swear they heard voices, voices that knew their names. What remains most chilling is the note scrawled by the father of the last vanished family. The door is opening. We cannot fight it anymore. No one knows where that door led, or if it still waits below the house. But if the house has fed on silence, on secrets buried deep, then perhaps speaking the story aloud, here, now, is itself an act of danger. And maybe that is why the town stays quiet. Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe they've learned the only way to survive is to pretend nothing ever happened. Yet silence doesn't erase history. It only delays its return. And someday, when the door opens again, it may not be a family that disappears. It could be an entire town, or worse, whoever dares to listen too closely.